Welcome. You're watching Vision Plus. I'm Bonnie Libhart, and we're happy that you joined us this time here on Victory Network. Some of you may remember that my co-host, my daughter Emily, got killed a few weeks ago. And when I read in Jeremiah a certain verse in 9:24, it reminds me of her. And so many people have asked since the funeral, what do you do at a funeral? What goes on? How do you cope with it? And so many wonderful things have happened as a result of her going on to be with the Lord that I wanted to share with you some of the things that you have asked. What to do at a funeral, what to do at a viewing, what to do when someone dies. The first thing that you can do and remember is that you can't do anything wrong. If you call them and say, I care, then that's doing something for them. If you call and say, is there anything I can do? 99% of the time there isn't anything you can do, but they want to hear the words from you that you care. Don't worry, you're not interrupting anything. You're not, there's nothing you can do wrong. So just remember to go ahead and give them a call. They may want something as simple as taking their car to get it washed, because maybe they hadn't had an opportunity to do that, hadn't needed to, hadn't thought about it. There are such simple things. I know I don't keep Cokes in the house all the time. My brother came, well, 3 brothers and 3 sisters-in-law, and another Tony's brother and his wife, and I didn't happen to have any Coke, so my brother asked if there was any Cokes in the refrigerator. If you do something as simple as bringing a couple Cokes over for them to have, or something like that, and I'm talking about immediately when the family starts pouring in before you've had time to do anything. Maybe they'd like to have the sheets changed on the bed. There's some such small things that you could have done. That somebody sent in someone to clean the house. That was wonderful, just to go through it and give it a little once-over. Because if you have a sudden death, there's things that you don't do. How do you cope with it? We're going to listen to Camie Farrenton, my niece, who I videotaped a few years ago, actually, when her grandmother and another niece of mine died. And she's going to talk about some of those things, and I just wanted to share those with you. One of the things that I always thought of when Emily was around, she was never the one that seemed to want to get glory for everything that she did, and one of the things that probably is one of my faults, I always wanted somebody to say, oh, you did a good job, oh, and I wanted to take all the accolades. But she didn't seem to be that person. She was just, had a lot of reticent kind of attitude and was in the background. So when I read Jeremiah 9:24, it reminds me of her. And I'm reading the Bible through, and I came across this. And I like to memorize something as I'm doing my walks early in the morning. So yesterday morning, this was what I memorized. But let him that glorieth glory in this, that he understand and knoweth me, that I am the Lord, who exercises loving kindness, justice, and righteousness in the earth. For in these things I delight, saith the Lord. Isn't that exciting? Isn't that neat? I just love it, for us to know that what our Father, what our Heavenly Father, what our Lord Jesus Christ glorieth in is that He exercises loving kindness, and that He takes delight in doing loving kindness for us, and righteousness and justice. Boy, I hope He doesn't have too much justice that I should have. If he doesn't give me a whole lot of mercy, I'm in a lot of trouble, because if I get justice of what all the things I've done that I shouldn't have done, or have omitted things I should have done, I think that so many people, so many of you are so kind to think of things to do when somebody needs help. I know that here at Victory Network, with all of your help, put together over $1,000 to help toward Emily's funeral. She didn't have any kind of insurance, and so that's $7,000 we didn't anticipate. And I really appreciated that. It just seemed like that so many of you are so thoughtful. I know that Vicki and Chuck just thought of so many things to do, and one of the things they did was just come and sit with us for a day, and we're there to answer the phone. There's so many things that people think of to do, and I thought perhaps you could learn that there are so many positive aspects about one passing through this part of their lifetime. And I just wanted to share this with you. Camie Farrenton, my niece, who is a gerontologist and studied under some people, maybe I wouldn't be the one to study under those, but a gerontologist is the one that deals with elderly people as they go through the transition time from this life to the next. And I don't really know exactly how Camie stands, but I do know that she loves the Lord Jesus Christ, and she maybe doesn't know Him the way you and I always do, but I wanted to share this with you. So if we could go to the tape that was made at Sweet Incorporated, Sweet meaning spiritual wealth everyone's entitled to, then this is Camie and me at another studio when we talk about death and dying and the positive aspects of that.
Aides and nurses begin, everyone knows the last days. Everyone feels it. Everyone senses it. And aides and nurses became hesitant to go into a room because of their own uncomfortable feelings about death. And so at the time when a person most needed it, they became most shut out from that experience. They didn't get to, they became most alone at a time when they needed to be most with people. So I thought if I could help staff people in nursing homes see that they needed to participate with that person at that time and let them talk about how they felt about it and let them share their fears and their sadness and all the emotions that you have at that time, that person would be really receiving the gift that they deserve in that environment. I think every human being deserves to make that most glorious transition in the most dignified manner that is possible. And so that was began my interest in the whole area of death and dying.
How did that affect your being with your grandmother for these last 3 days in the
It's very
hospital?
interesting. My grandmother probably is the most important person to me in my life. I can't, besides my mother and father, she just was a very significant part of my life. And she's 87 years old, and so she certainly had a long, good life, and she's had a, you know, you can't, the fact that she's dying is appropriate within the scheme of longevity. What has been wonderful is to be able to help her make that transition with the courage and the dignity she has. She has selected all of her pallbearers. This is not depressing stuff. This is wonderful stuff. She is participating in cleaning up her life and helping the people around her accept the fact that this is her last days. So she's accepted her pallbearers. She wanted to write some letters to say some goodbyes, nothing depressing. A matter of fact, taking care of business, people that she wanted to relate to. She's been given an opportunity to do that. Probably my most thing that I feel the best about in all of this is that I wanted her to be able to tell people she loves how much she loves them and the things about them that she loves. I think so many times people die, and people who are left behind are left with grief, but also maybe not knowing if they were special in that person's life, if they were meaningful, especially mothers and daughters. I think that's a real time that it becomes most difficult. And she really talked to me about the things that she thought made my mother special, her other daughter special, and I really encouraged her to tell those people those things. And I know that that gift will be so cherished by my mother and by my aunt, to just realize that, you know, they finally hear. Maybe what they've been trying to deal with all their life is feelings that they weren't acceptable in some way. So now they have a chance to hear that they're truly valued for the things that they wanted to be valued for. And it's been a wonderful experience. and such dignity. We've cried together, you know. We're going to miss each other. We got to talk about how we felt about that. We got to talk about what we meant to each other in our lives. I feel like it's an extraordinary gift that I've been given to be able to be with her in this style at this time in her life. It's been a wonderful experience for me.
It's been one that you weren't able to share with when your sister Ann died. First of all, she was only 9 months old at the time. How do you cope with having your own sister, not to get to know her as a teenager and as a person, other than being 9 months old?
I've thought about that very recently, and the reason why I have is because I think that oftentimes one can never really explain a death of a child. That's not something that anyone can really come to terms with at some level. What I thought this opportunity brought to my family was a time to bring us very close as a family, to share in the grief, in the loss, bringing us all together as a result of having a child who died within the family. My family did not choose to deal with that. The fear that we had about feeling and the depth of feeling was so scary that we decided not to do it. And as a result, I was probably 15 years old, 14 or 15 years old when that happened. I don't remember the funeral. I don't remember holding that child. It's like that whole time of my life is blocked out. And now, at this age in my life, I'm just starting to wonder, why did I block that out? Why is that not in my memory? Why don't I have, why can't I remember what that felt like in my family? And the reason why is that I chose to be numb. I chose to be numb because the sadness in our family was not acceptable. And I think we missed a grand opportunity to come together as a family and really touch each other and really find out what grief is like. And grief is something that is to be shared and it's not something to be scared of. And this culture, we're so frightened of grief. And if people knew, it has a wonderful power of love within grief, because it says we are here together and we need each other and we need to support each other at this time. And so I think we missed a grand opportunity for that. Aside from the loss, you know, I think we could have come together.
Why do you think it has taken you so many years to even think about it consciously?
I think that basically I've lived my life fearing sadness. That I think, being raised in the South, I think I mentioned this to you earlier, I think there's a particular syndrome about little girls and women in the South, and is that we're cute and we're fun and we're nice, and we don't get sad and we don't get mad and we don't deal with those extremes of feelings because they're not nice. They make people uncomfortable. So what I did, and what I know a lot of women that I know did, is they pushed those feelings down. They shoved them down, and they coped with them sometimes in inappropriate ways, sometimes in ways that would have been more healthy if they had been coped with in a more healthy response to a sincere situation. There are situations in life that are sad, and you need to be sad. And there are situations that make you mad, and you need to be mad. When anger becomes destructive is when it's not dealt with. It's when it's pushed down, and then it comes out in an inappropriate way. And I think that's why, for years, I didn't deal with it. I had to start feeling sadness about other issues in my life before the death of my sister many, many years ago could even come to my consciousness. I had blocked it out for so many years because of my fear of sadness.
How do you think that recognizing that your brilliant, bright grandmother was now dying of cancer helped you to come to terms with Ann's death, with your sister's death?
just seeing what it's done for my relationship with my grandmother, that I am able to talk with her and to, this is not a secret. She knows she's dying. I know she's dying. We don't have to play games with each other. We don't have to act like it's not happening. If I spent the last days of her life acting like this wasn't happening, I would miss an extraordinary experience. And I missed that experience once. I did not get to see from my father how it felt to lose a child. I didn't get to see from my mother what the pain was to lose a child, because although I knew grief was in the air, we didn't talk about it. We couldn't talk about it. People cried in the rooms behind shut doors. We didn't cry together. People, my father was just devastated by his own emotion in that situation, so we couldn't talk about it to him because he didn't want us to know that he felt emotion. I've always thought that Italians or people from other cultures who are more passionate and more feeling, and men cry and men hug each other, and I just think they have a more sane approach to what life's experiences are about. I kind of wish Americans weren't so hesitant, you know, to experience things.
Why do you think that you have been able to come to terms with this? You said that it's a glorious experience and that it's in the spirit of, why?
Well, I think one reason is because I was afforded the opportunity to train with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was doing some pioneering work in this level. But I think I'm personally very interested in the transitions in life. I think any transition is an extraordinary experience to participate in. And I think that death is one of the most wonderful experiences. I met a woman on a plane one time, and she had lost her husband to cancer. And the things that she told me about, I have never been more touched. She told me about after he dealt with the stages that everyone deals with, which is first denial, that there is death. Then there's anger. You know, why would God do this? There must not be a God if he's going to do, he wouldn't be doing this to me. And then there's the acceptance. Those are the three major periods that people go through. And they've got to go through them. They've got to go through the denial. They've got to go through the anger. And then when they get to the acceptance, that's where the creative part of the transition can begin. And this woman told me about her husband. They had young children. Her husband wrote a letter to her daughter to be read at her daughter's graduation, which was 10 years from then, letter to be read at their wedding, letters to be read when the first grandchild was born. He made a file, so he participated in every family event that came along, and I thought it was just what a way to have him still a part of the family. And he did that by simply acknowledging that his death was imminent and he was going to do it in a dignified way. And so he's going to be a part of his family for the rest of his life. And I just thought it was lovely.
You had said at one point, a week or so when we were talking before, that you had made a total surrender to what your life holds. And why do you think that why has this come about, that you're surrendered to the spiritual part of your life?
Maybe the whole matter rests on the fact that when you are comfortable with your own death, you become more comfortable in dealing with the death of those around you. And perhaps I've been fortunate enough in my spiritual development to become so comfortable with death because of the firmness of my belief that I no longer fear it. Doesn't mean I won't miss someone who dies, but I know I'm going to be with them, and I know what they're going to. So I have a freedom of fear that's extraordinary. And so perhaps my own spiritual development has given me an opportunity to feel the way I do about this process. And I know that when I dealt with staff people and in nursing homes, that their fear of their own death was a lot of times what was causing their fear of reaching out and touching a patient. It was too scary because they hadn't come to terms with it themselves. And I think I've just been fortunate enough through my own faith to come to terms with death.
One of the programs that we did in this Vision Plus series, one of the ladies had her granddaughter that died at age 6 months, and she was telling her feelings about that, and she said that she went through that same thing, denial and acknowledgement, well, anger, and then acknowledgement,
yeah, acceptance.
And she said that once she accepted that she actually saw that child one time, and she said, I really don't understand whether to call it a vision or whatever, but she saw the child playing in a sense in a paradise location, and she said that the child was actually running around. Now, the child that died was 9 months old, which wouldn't have been running around, but she said she saw this little child running around just as happy as could be, and she could see that it was the face of Jesus that was in the situation. And she said when the child looked up, she looked into the child's face, and it was the face of her grandson, Zachary, who had died, and said it just gave her such peace knowing that that child was now in the hands of Jesus, that it was there was a reason, and that child was happy. There was no unhappiness, and that she could live and be with that child for an eternity. And it gave her a total new picture of this transition period of time. And she said she didn't understand all of it, but it just gave her peace to know that the child was no longer unhappy and was well, no longer with a heart defect.
I believe that's absolutely possible, and I will be shocked if my grandmother and I, at some level, don't communicate. And I don't mean that by seeing spirits or anything. I mean, she will be with me. She will be with me.
And your grandmother has the cancer, but she evidently has a very bright mind, and her mind is not affected by this cancer.
We're blessed with that. This is a much harder process when people are no longer capable.
So she is able to give you these letters to the different family members, and how do you think that someone that doesn't have that peace in their heart that you have, that there is a time that you're going to be together again, or that you'll be able to communicate again, or that time of saying goodbye, how can they cope with it? If they have an Ann in their life that they weren't able to say goodbye to, or that they've blocked out of their mind, how could they now make a decision to deal with that?
Oh, something they haven't done, or something?
Yes, something they haven't done. They've had a death of a child or a loved one or a friend that they've put in the recesses of their mind.
I would think just opening communications with family members about how that instant touched their lives. Not trying to act like that it's a case that no one wants to talk about. It's a situation in life that no one wants to talk about. Where maybe 3 years later, your family is around a table and you just start a dialogue. This is how I felt at that time in my life, and I think it's an extraordinary opportunity to tell people that I felt this way, you did, so did I. I didn't know you did, and that's what brings human beings together, is their sharing of experiences. And it's when we try to act like we're having no experience that we really push ourselves apart. So I think the opportunity for love with the people who are still available, still here, is available to us in that process. And that's
what if the family just will not open up to you, and that there is no chance to, you try to open the conversation they want? How else could you deal with that? Would you say friends, or just their relationship with God, or how else? What would be another way? Or has your family been able to deal with it with you?
Well, we're starting to, for the first time, we're starting to talk about, how it felt. I've started the dialogue because I truly have amnesia during that portion of my life. I don't remember one thing. And so I've been asking out of curiosity. I wanted to know what happened in that time in my life. I don't know. If someone doesn't want to talk about it, all you can do is love them and hope that their turmoil, which that is great turmoil. If people can't deal with their feelings and they can't express their feelings, there's a turmoil in that, and all you can do is just hope that your love for them and your caring for them will make them more and more comfortable to express their own feelings about things.
Now, in your particular case, you and your grandmother and the whole family, she's been sent home from the hospital and there's nothing else they can do. And unless the intervention of the good Lord just heals her, that's what is to be expected in a very short period of time. Our daughter has had cancer, and we feel that she's healed through the surgery and so forth. But I think that whether you live or die after a traumatic or a very serious disease, cancer as the major example, that you go through the same thing, that denial, and then the anger.
Absolutely.
And then the acceptance, even if the person does live over it or does come through, or whatever method, healing, surgery, whatever. How can, there's some people, you had said that people deal with it in different ways. How are some of the ways that they deal with it if they don't deal with it? In other words, what are some of the avenues? Were you referring to drugs and alcohol, and what did you mean?
Alcohol is the most, when I bring to mind alcohol, it numbs you to feeling. And anytime I know someone has a drinking problem, one of my first reactions is, what are they numbing? What inside of them needs to come out so they don't have to deal with it in that way? Separating yourself from people, not wanting to get close to people is a way that people deal with that. Of course, drug abuse would be another way to deal with that. I think any human excess, lots of anger, or, you know, the man who's just gruff and angry and keeps people at a distance, any of those excessive human emotions or reactions usually indicates that a person has a fear of something they're feeling inside, and they're trying to keep from feeling it, and they're trying to protect themselves from it. So there are very negative ways that people deal with that. It's funny, it always makes me, I always feel caring for people in those situations, because I know they're crying for help. I know they're really trying to ask for help.
Well, to summarize what we've said about death and dying, that there is a positive way to deal with that. Why don't you just summarize some of the ways that you and your grandmother, and you and your family, both with your grandmother dying and also your sister who's already died, how you've dealt with this and how someone else can do this, to summarize what you said.
Mainly, I would just say that you need to first acknowledge and deal with the fact that the person is dying, and they are allowed to have anger, they're allowed to have grief, they're allowed to have denial, and then you sit down together and you work into the acceptance as a family, as a group, and you deal with that person and how they can make that grand transition in the most effective way. The business that they need to clear up, the letters that they want to write, they're not going to be around to see a granddaughter. Write that letter and let that granddaughter know that it's going to be read when she's married, read when she's graduating from high school. The way that that grandmother's or whoever is dying is still participating in the family, and I just think that is a glorious transition, and it allows families to come together. It doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean the grief is not there. It doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt, but you share it and you go through it together, and that's what families are about.